Good evening, my local drones. This is Bio Gundam here, and I'm back again for another review. So today I'm going to be reviewing the manga of the series, Ear Gear. And for those who have been paying attention, you'd be like, hey, didn't you do this review fucking a few months ago? And I am doing a re-recording of this review because the last recording wasn't up to the desired standard. And after thinking about it for the last few months, I've decided to try and take this, hobby I do a bit more seriously and try and pump out products that are a bit more, that are better, that are good, So we're doing a bit more quality control. So my first impressions, when first hearing about the series Ear Gear, I immediately thought the premise sounded really cool, despite the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of sports series. Fortunately, Ear Gear is one of the few exceptions to the rule, due to how successfully it jumps the shark, pun intended of course, and taking the idea of competitive roller skating and elevating with the addition of an increasingly more insane, superpowered battle shonen dimension. So when it comes to the story of Ear Gear, we all know the story of Icarus, don't we? The story of a boy and his father who made wings out of feathers and wax to escape their imprisonment, only for the boy to die when he disregarded his father's instructions and chose to fly too close to the sun he so yearned for. The story of how hubris, stubbornness, and unchecked indulgence in one's freedoms and passions could also become one's downfall. But what if you were the one with the wings? What if you could fly like Icarus? What would you do with such a freedom? While I don't have the answer to such a question, this series just might. I'll tell you about the tale about a young man who is loved by the wind, who because of that love received his wings that gave him the power to fly wherever he wished for as long as he wished. What did he do with that power, you ask? Well, that's not for me to say, but rather for you to discover for yourself. But in the meantime, dear listener, sit back, relax, get some food, maybe a drink, and hear about the tale of the boy who is loved by the wind. Our story begins in a world in which devices called air treks, or ATs for short, a new type of high-tech motorized inline skates, have been created and taken the world by storm, in turn leading to the creation of an urban underground microcosm centered around them, and their use, with their users having come to be known as Storm Riders. It's in this world that we follow the adventures of local high school delinquent group leader Itsuki Minami, nicknamed Iki, as he enters and comes to thrive in the world of AT and Storm Riders after being prompted to seek greater power following the one-side defeat of himself and his gang by a local Storm Rider gang. It's there that he quickly gets incredibly passionate about ATs, so much so that he decides to form his own Storm Rider team. From then on, Ear Gear goes from 0 to 100 extremely quickly, with the first chapters up until around chapter 80 probably being the series' peak. They not only do a great job at portraying the urban street punk nature of the setting, but they're also when the series is at its most grounded and creative, and how Iki and his team strategize and employ different tactics in order to prevail in competitive matches against other Storm Riders. If you like high-octane street fights, you may want to take note of this series. Now, where things start to take a nosedive is after Iki and crew start making a reputation for themselves, despite not actually having done much by that point or even being that skilled. It's then that people in the local Storm Rider community start to think that Iki's destined to eventually become what is called the Sky King, the hero that will become the most powerful Storm Rider that has ever lived and will give humanity wings. At this point of the story, we're also introduced to a rider team known as Genesis. Genesis being a collective of numerous teams that have all united under one banner, resulting in the largest, strongest Storm Rider team in history. So to make a not so long story even less long, these people decide to go under Iki and his crew's banner, making Iki their de facto leader. And just like that, he gains a small army under him who are committed to helping him in his rise to glory, with the provision that he will help them achieve their goal of defeating the team known as Sleeping Forest. It's then that we also learn more about the setting and the way in which the Storm Rider community is structured, letting the full premise of the series be revealed. Turns out, Sleeping Forest's mission is to protect the mythicized Tropium Tower, the location which practically all other Storm Riders aim to climb, making them enemies. Additionally, Genesis' second goal is also introduced, which is to collect all the Regalias, a series of special ATs that grant their users incredible but ridiculous powers, the strongest of which is housed in the tower, as Sleeping Forest's true target of protection, known as the Sky Regalia. It then springboards into what only can be described as a clusterfuck. It decides to add and just keep on adding things to the plot that just don't fit, including but not limited to a group of generically altered at birth Air Trek Master super beings, a cheaper corresponding group with the former's personalities and memories copy-pasted into them, a years-long conspiracy or one man's dream of ruling the world, tons of people being killed, an aircraft carrier containing former President Obama, a zero-G battle in space, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. It attempts to make the plot more interesting, but just completely loses focus, adding and compounding layers upon layers of nonsense, spoiling the simple, if not bizarre story that it had started out with. It needed not add any more. It's like having the perfect sandwich made, only for some arsehole to come in and add unnecessary shit for the sake of doing so, in the process ruining what was there in the first place. If Ear Gear could be described using the phrase roller skating on crack, well then the amount of crack mangaka Old Great was on when writing this must have been awe-inspiring to say the least. In fact, I'm surprised that the series had at least some level of story consistency to begin with, considering. Even still, it manages to be a fun, high-octane series with some nice themes, even without counting friendship as one of them. One of the core themes of Ear Gear is freedom, and what freedom means to each individual. For one person, freedom could mean doing whatever you want, whenever you want, while to another it could mean being free of toxic relationships or situations, maybe even realizing that worrying about things that are out of your control is unhealthy and letting loose. Whatever flavor you want. Now, as far as this theme exploration goes, it's concise and to the point. We are shown the positive side of freedom that encourages people's lives to change not only for the betterment of themselves, but also for those around them, as opposed to the negative side represented by the main villain, that uses their freedom as an excuse to commit morally deplorable acts in the pursuit of their dream. Now that's pretty much all I have to say about the story, so now it's time to move on to characters. So this series has a lot of characters, but for the sake of brevity, I'll just talk about the few of the ones that tie more into the series themes. And what better way to start than the one that expresses said themes the most. Enter main character Iki. While at first glance he may come across as a no-good street punk that just likes to brawl and get into trouble, he's a lot more than that. He's pretty much the perfect representation of the wind, freedom in the most pure sense of the word. Iki, a very special kind of individual. One that doesn't change and doesn't need to change, but rather just needs to succeed in coming into his own. As his awareness grows, his inhibitions are removed, allowing him to become as he was ultimately destined to be. This is an arc that Ear Gear accomplishes really well. He just flows past all the barriers around him, momentarily obstructed, but never truly stopped. It's also because of this trait of his, the ability to persevere and live freely, that his character is so great in context. The way that through his actions he acts as a catalyst for other characters to find their way and grow parallel to him, as any good battle-shown protagonist should. Another character of note is Kazuma Mikaru, nicknamed Kazu, Iki's second in command. He was originally introduced as an introverted and underconfident character, particularly due to his proximity to a character as capable and productive as Iki. This in turn causes him to feel inadequate, like he's slowing the team down, and isn't worthy of the hopes that people place in him. His struggle to become stronger and create a sense of self-worth for himself is very compelling to watch play out, especially considering the length that the series has to develop and resolve it. Not only that, but the progression of his character arc of coming into his own and becoming a more confident person is handled very nicely. Generally speaking, most of Ear Gear's characters go through something similar to either Iki or Kazu, and even if they don't have a full character arc, they at least grow a bit. This holds especially true for most of the characters of Iki's team, and some supporting characters. What development they get is simple and to the point, and considering how off the rails the story ends up going, it's quite shocking that the series accomplished doing that right at least. Although in the grand scheme of things, most of the characters in the series range from interesting to rather cookie cutter. Fortunately, most of them still manage to be likable and entertaining, and at the end of the day, that was all that was both expected and needed from a series like this. And it is time for me now to move on to the art. One thing I must give praise to is the art. It's amazing, or its style is anyway. The quality and detail of the artwork over time dipped from good to average, with some of the fight scenes looking a bit blurry at times, not to mention clunky, with little sense of flow from one action to the next. This ends up hurting the series a lot, considering what a fundamental aspect of it the action is. Another aspect that shows a rather poor attention to detail is the backgrounds, that oftentimes aren't given as much detail as they should. While as the series progresses, the art does eventually start to get consistently better, it ends up becoming too little too late. I mean, for crying out loud, many other mangaka can and have improved by leaps and bounds in far fewer chapters. so why not this one? However, as stated previously, for as many negative things as there are about the art, the amount of style and personality that the art radiates more than makes up for them. It just has this incredibly intense street punk vibe to it. Another thing that deserves a thumbs up as far as art goes is the character designs. All the characters, with few exceptions in the series, look so unique and interesting, something which is a true achievement considering the sheer volume of them. Although some of the characters are more titillating than others, wink wink nudge nudge, not surprising considering the fact that mangaka Old Great was originally a hentai artist. And on that note, it's good to see that he still got it. That is all I have to say about the art, so it's time for me to move on to my enjoyment. Ear Gear is a series that I found very enjoyable. There's action, cool characters, fan service, sex jokes, romance, and comedy. The reason I enjoy the series is just so intrinsic, what with it having everything that appeals to me, specifically, for better or for worse. What really hit me through it all was all the crazy shit that happens over its course, and honestly, I just really enjoy it when a series embraces the insanity. I mean, it's a story where roller skating can give you superpowers, to the point where there are scenes in which characters practically summon stands. It's because of those, to say the least, bizarre elements that I enjoy it as much as I do. And it's time for me to move on to my overall thoughts. Overall, Ear Gear is what I'd call a product of its time. The early 2000s were a period full of series that were really out there and so over the top that they couldn't possibly be mistaken as being from any other time period. It's very hard to describe why that is in words, but there's just this feeling I have. If I were to try and put my finger on it, I would say it's because from what I've seen, a notable amount of series from that period were really trying to mix it up by taking, a bit from everything, as so far as genres are concerned. In the end, that resulted in some interesting series, as far as the meta goes, for better or for worse. So if I were to recommend Ear Gear to someone, I'd do so with the caveat that they have to go in with an open mind that's able to embrace the insanity. If you don't, you're going to find it a chore to get through, and I feel that the intent of Ear Gear was for the reader to simply enjoy the spectacle anyway. But if you're not into series that are kind of out there, fucking crazy even, then Ear Gear is sadly not for you. This is the end of my review, so this is Bio Gundam signing off, and special thanks to my editor Lone Crit for his assistance, and continual help in the Bio Gundam franchise.